Some of the most common ingredients in conventional sunscreens may actually be harming your health.
Her favorite sunscreen is a DIY sunscreen. It's sunscreen misinformation season. I'm Michelle, chemistry PhD and skincare nerd. I've become the person you'll message when you see this kind of video. You've all been lied to about sunscreen, but this brave toxicologist tells us the truth.
Linked to hormone disruption, increased oxidative stress, and even accelerated tumor growth under sunlight exposure.
Nothing she says in her video is like a brand new toxicology insight. These points have been repeated for years by groups like the EWG, apps like Yucca, people in supermarkets.
Endocrine hormone disrupting ingredients.
I would never put them on my body.
Sunscreen sprays have also been shown to be contaminated.
It doesn't get absorbed by the skin and it's 100% non-toxic.
I've explained why they aren't much of a concern before, especially when you think about the risks of sun exposure. But when you have a PhD toxicologist who's been on lots of podcasts saying this.
I'm Dr. Yvonne Burkhart, a PhD toxicologist with over 23 years of experience studying the effects of toxic chemicals.
People pay attention. Let's talk a bit about expertise. Toxicology is the most relevant here. My PhD is medicinal chemistry. That has a lot of overlap. It's also about substances interacting with your body, but it is less directly relevant than toxicology. So if you're just comparing the qualifications of the two Asian women with fringes, you would expect her to be more correct. That's why you should check the consensus of relevant experts if you don't really know the science of a topic. It's not always going to be right, but it's better than just one person because there are experts in every field with outlier opinions. I know a PhD biologist who thought microwaves made your food radioactive. They do not. A PhD chemist who thought MSG was super bad for you, but only the artificial type. Even though the same MSG ions are in like tomatoes and cheese, this is basic chemistry. Once you know enough scientists, you start getting like a collection of this kind of thing, and that's because scientists are people. We have biases that can affect our opinions like anyone else, and this whole natural is safer bias is very strong. We will see a lot more of this later. I use a lot of toxicology resources for my safety videos. I've collaborated with toxicologists and I've had them check my work. And what she says in her video and in most of her videos really, that does not reflect what the vast majority of toxicologists think, especially not the ones who understand this area the best, the ones who are bringing scientific arguments that actually make sense. And she actually says a lot of stuff in her videos that are sus, even if you don't know much science. For this response, I'm collaborating with Moskin Lab. He's tackling the more hardcore safety points in his video. Make sure you watch that too. We also got two experienced PhD toxicologists to check our scripts to make sure the toxicology is correct. Let's get into it.
The number one thing I wish I knew is that some ingredients can actually promote skin cancer. This one is really shocking because that's the exact opposite of what sunscreen is supposed to do.
This is just about one ingredient, retinol palmitate. I'm going to call it RP. It is a form of vitamin A. It's been used in lots of skincare for decades. She says studies show it increases skin cancer, and the EWG also bring this up a lot. So you might expect maybe they found that skincare users have more skin cancer or they have more DNA mutations. No.
Studies show that retinol palmitate, when applied to the skin and exposed to sunlight, generates reactive oxygen species, or ROS, and lipid peroxides, two well-established drivers of oxidative stress and photocarcinogenesis, which is the formation of cancer in response to sunlight.
Here is a massive red flag. If you check these studies, none of them are on actual human skin, even though she says when applied to skin. And the bit she's highlighted just tested retinol palmitate in basically a square test tube, in vitro means in glass. There are also studies on cells and hairless mice, and she talks about one specific mouse study.
Animal studies conducted by the National Toxicology Program found that mice whose skin was treated with retinol palmitate and exposed to sunlight developed significantly more skin tumors, but yet somehow this ingredient is still included in countless mainstream products, including sunscreens, which are marketed for daily use.
My top tip in this video, if there is a pretty shocking claim like, all of these common everyday products are causing cancer, and there's 15-year-old studies showing it, and after all of this time, only a few scientists are telling you the truth. Be extremely suspicious, check some secondary sources, where relevant experts are interpreting the studies with a broader perspective, and they're explaining what they mean. This is a much better way to understand a topic. I've seen so many people who seem to think checking studies is better. They give you the real facts, but that is just not true. A single study usually tells you hardly anything. Science is built up from lots of studies. You need to know what the whole body of evidence says to put a single study into context. Is it a fluke result? Are there other factors that explain it? Would we expect the same thing to happen in real life? Which real life situations? Do newer studies tell us something different? A single study is like a puzzle piece. Oh no, she's bringing out the puzzle again. I love this analogy and I will not apologize. What do you think this is? Maybe it's like a curly straw in a glass, or like a flamingo leg? But if you know the full picture, it's pretty obvious. It is the lace of a ballet shoe. The mouse studies she's talking about are pretty old. This potential RP issue was taken very seriously, especially in the US where sunscreen is a drug. That's why they ran this 1-year mouse study. These are not cheap or easy to get ethics approval for, so there are a lot of secondary sources that put these studies into context. Here is a really good one. This is an SCCS safety assessment. They are a panel of very experienced scientists who are mostly toxicologists. It is much more detailed and rigorous than a standard peer-reviewed paper. This is what EU regulations are based on. It mentions other secondary sources and it explains why they don't think the things she mentioned are relevant to sunscreen. In a test tube, retinol palmitate is on its own. In skin, there is a lot of other stuff around like antioxidants. Hairless mice are very different from us. They are nocturnal, they didn't evolve for sun exposure. They also usually have fur, and the specific strain used here is albino. Really sensitive animals are often used for studies, so they develop tumors faster and you get clear results faster as well. So for us, retinoids could work the other way and they could actually be protective. Dermatologists have used retinoids for about 50 years. A lot of the evidence she shows also applies to retinol and tretinoin. They are actually used for preventing skin cancer. Dermatology patients get checked by dermatologists a lot, so if skin cancer was a big problem, by now we really should have seen more signs in humans. That mouse study also had some weird results that can't be explained by RP being a problem. This more detailed version is from 2016, but the 2022 version has the same conclusion. And this report also recommended restricting retinol in skincare because it could be adding a little bit to the lots of vitamin A that we get in food and supplements, so it isn't like they aren't cautious. Now, secondary sources can have problems, the authors can have biases, they might leave some studies out. A lot of review authors aren't relevant experts and don't understand the topic. Sometimes they are paper mills. For product safety, a lot of the time the best sources are these official reports. If someone is showing individual studies and they leave these out, that is a massive red flag.
Number 5 thing I wish I knew is that lifestyle, sun protection, is just as important. We've been conditioned to believe that SPF is the one and only answer, but in reality, there are science-backed lifestyle strategies that can dramatically reduce sun exposure and the damage caused by sun exposure. And they don't require layering on synthetic chemicals every single day like we've been taught.
She talks about avoiding peak times, clothing, hats, and shade. I'm in Australia, we have lots of sun protection awareness and research. We actually get taught, slip on a shirt, slop on some sunscreen, slap on a hat, seek shade, and slide on sunglasses. I agree that in the US, people maybe focus a bit too much on sunscreen, but in Australia, sunscreen is still a crucial part of our layering strategy because sometimes the other stuff, it's just not practical and none of these are perfect. And you can see this in her video.
Long sleeve shirts, wide brim hats.
That is a lot of uncovered skin. Plus, a lot of our exposure is indirect. We don't just get UV in the sun. It gets bounced onto us or scattered by the sky as well as the ground, and this happens with regular light as well. That's why we can still see stuff in the shade, but UV is much bouncier. If you're at the beach and you're completely in the shade of a pretty big umbrella as wide as I am tall, I am not very tall, you still get over 1/3 of the UV compared to in the sun. Basically, you're getting SPF 3. It's similar for hats. This style in one study gave an average of SPF 3 for your nose and less than SPF 2 for your cheek. Protective clothing is great, especially treated and synthetic fabrics dyed in dark colors. With lightweight summer clothes, often you're getting below UPF 15. So layering is best, you multiply the protection factors. Sunscreen's numbers look really good, but the issue is user error. If you skip a spot or if it rubs off and you don't reapply, you still get protection if you layer other things on top.
Avoid sunlight during peak hours since UV radiation is the strongest between 10 a.m. and 4 p.m. So getting sunlight before 10 a.m. is amazing.
This is just way too general. UV levels change a lot. We all have the internet. Just check the UV index. You can even have an app for it. Australian guidelines have recognized that sun exposure can be beneficial since the 90s. So if the UV index is under 3 and you have average white skin, you don't have specific health concerns, officially, you can go outside for less than an hour with unprotected skin. And this is actually encouraged in the middle of winter. Most places around the world also say this now. So as an example, in Sydney, where I am, the cutoff times in summer are more like 8:30 and 5:30, but then in winter, it is safe all day. Midday is actually best for vitamin D.
You can also eat antioxidant-rich foods because What we eat is one of the most important tools for our health. Oxidative stress is a key mechanism behind UV-induced skin damage and ultimately cancer. Certain nutrients can actually help your skin to buffer UV exposure, reduce inflammation, and support tissue repair.
I'm not super against this advice. Fruit and vegetables are great for you for lots of reasons, not just antioxidants. But oxidative stress equals cancer, therefore antioxidants are anti-cancer. This logic doesn't work, especially with antioxidant supplements. I see so many people recommending them as like a safe alternative to sunscreen, like in these Huberman videos. Oxidation isn't all bad, it's biologically important, it's part of killing off abnormal cells, for example. Some clinical trials found that antioxidant supplements can actually speed up cancer growth. Natural supplements also pretty commonly cause health problems like liver failure. To me, it's pretty wild that people think they are safer than sunscreen, like no one is turning up to emergency because of sunscreen outside of allergies.
Here are some evidence-backed options. First, tomatoes, which are high in lycopene. This has been shown to reduce UV-induced skin redness. Leafy greens, like spinach and kale, which provide lutein and zeaxanthin.
Massive problem here, nature is not standardized, so lycopene is the main chemical that makes tomatoes red, and we all know tomatoes are not equally red. And this is actually the reference she has here for kale, variation in antioxidant content of kale and other vegetables. It goes through tons of factors that affect it, like where it's grown, how you cook it. People also absorb things differently, and stuff that you eat takes a while to get to your skin. Out of the antioxidants she mentions, lycopene is the most promising and tomato paste is the best source from food, but it is still not that effective. For example, this study, after people ate 2 shot glasses of tomato paste every day for 3 months, it took 1.5 times more UV to turn skin red. This is actually pretty impressive for a UV food study, but we're essentially getting SPF 1.4. This study is similar, 40% less redness after 10 weeks, but then 4 weeks was not enough to see an effect. And the researchers actually say this protection is not comparable to use of a sunscreen. This article is actually in her screenshot. This amount of tomato paste translates to about 1 kilogram or 2 pounds of fresh tomatoes. And you would need to eat this every day for 2.5 months before going into the sun, and then you would get less than SPF 2. It's just not practical. It is why we invented things like sunscreen. I'm not sure if she just doesn't know this data or if she's purposely leaving it out.
Number 6 thing I wish I knew is that there are better sunscreen options, and I'm going to show you how to find them.
When someone talks about toxic sunscreens, they have alternatives and no prizes for guessing.
Choose mineral sunscreens with non-nano zinc oxide as the only active ingredient. Zinc oxide is a physical UV blocker that sits on the surface of the skin and reflects UVA and UVB rays. It doesn't absorb them, unlike chemical filters do.
I've talked about this so many times. Zinc oxide mostly works by absorbing UV and then converting it to heat, just like chemical sunscreens. Only 5 to 10% is reflected, and reflecting isn't actually better than absorbing and getting rid of the UV completely. But more importantly, mineral sunscreens have a lot of downsides. Zinc oxide and titanium dioxide, they are tiny solid particles, so they feel a lot heavier. And if you apply the right amount, a lot of the time you look really white. This is me, my skin is not that dark. So a lot of reviews say a little goes a long way, which just doesn't work for sunscreen. You need about 1/4 teaspoon on your face to get the SPF on the label. The vast majority of people, they prefer chemical sunscreens and they give up on mineral sunscreens. They end up going without anything. Sunscreen needs to actually be on your skin to work. There's also a part here that's really weird.
Make sure that it is labeled as non-nano, which means the particles will not get absorbed into your skin and they'll actually stay on your skin's surface. And this is really important because studies show that nano zinc oxide crosses the skin barrier.
The screenshot she shows actually says the opposite. Nanoparticles are safe. Zinc oxide nanoparticles do not penetrate through the outermost layer of skin. She even highlights this bit. Zinc oxide nanoparticles were retained on the surface or within the superficial layers of the SC, that is the top dead skin layers. This speaks strongly for the safety of zinc oxide nanoparticle sunscreens. This is not in her reference list. Maybe she realized later it didn't support her narrative.
Avoid fillers and filters like oxybenzone, octinoxate, and retinol palmitate, as well as avobenzone, homosalate, and octisalate. Some of these ingredients have been linked to endocrine disruption activity, meaning that they can interfere with our hormone balance even at low concentrations.
Mo tackles this in his video, but I wanted to quickly mention a few things. First off, this myth that US sunscreens have ingredients banned in the EU. These are the ingredients commonly used in US sunscreens. All of them are allowed in the EU. The limits are different, but it isn't like US sunscreens are a lot less safe. This video has more on that. There's also this myth going around that the dose makes the poison doesn't apply for endocrine disruptors. Basically, there were a bunch of studies where very low doses seem to have a higher effect, which is not what usually happens. Usually, more stuff, more effect. This idea of endocrine disruptors being somehow completely different gained a lot of traction. But there's actually lots of controversy about whether these results were even correct. There are newer analyses that found a lot of these low-dose effect studies, they weren't well designed, they couldn't be replicated, they seemed to be fluke findings. So it doesn't seem to apply to at least most potential endocrine disruptors. And either way, dose is not completely irrelevant like a lot of people seem to be saying. Different doses still have different effects. There's also this term endocrine disrupting chemical or endocrine disruptor. It's an example of a scientific term that's misunderstood because it sounds sort of like it's something that disrupts your endocrine system or your hormones, but it's actually a much lower bar. For cosmetic ingredients, it usually means that in test tube studies, the ingredient binds to a hormone receptor. That's where hormones work. They usually bind only very weakly, and it's pretty questionable how they could have any real effect at low levels, especially when there's tons of other substances naturally in your body that also bind weakly to these same receptors.
Skip the sprays and instead go for lotions, creams, or sticks. Sticks are the easiest and least messy option for kids to apply on themselves, and my kids actually love them.
I agree sprays aren't great, not much lands on your skin. I did a video testing it here. But sticks also don't give you much protection. With the sticks I tried, I needed over 30 swipes on average to get that labeled SPF. I really don't think her kids are applying 30 swipes.
Look for third-party verifications and always full ingredient transparency.
She mentions USDA certified organic and Cosmos EcoCert. These do mean that it meets someone's criteria, but there are lots of problems with the criteria in the first place and organic in general. Organic farming doesn't allow some farming practices, in particular it's things that they'd consider less natural like some pesticides. But organic produce isn't actually safer or better for the environment. Jen of the EcoWell and I covered it in this video. She also has an article on certifications. But I'm not sure Dr. Yvonne Burkhart actually understands organic or why certifications are important because she says this.
You can also look for organic ingredients like aloe vera, shea butter, and beeswax.
That is not how organic works. These ingredients are produced with non-organic methods too. It is not some ingredient-specific thing.
Number 5 tip for choosing a safer sunscreen is to choose one with fewer ingredients. A simple formulation is always better.
This is not true, and it is weird coming from a toxicologist. Some products have more ingredients because they're complying with safety limits for each of them. If you combine different sunscreen actives, you get a high SPF without too much of any single ingredient, for example. Ingredients can also work better together. The classic example is antioxidants, which she seems to really like.
My favorite sunscreen for the body is tallow-based, and no, it doesn't make me smell like beef.
Her favorite sunscreen is a DIY sunscreen. Someone just put it in a jar and slapped a nice label on it. Sunscreens are drugs in the US. You can't just sell homemade drugs. There are so many red flags in this. I would report it, but I think the FDA has a bit going on right now. This has 2 different SPFs, which is sus, but there's also no way it's been properly SPF tested. It looks like they just thought 20% zinc means SPF 30, which is not how it works. The zinc oxide needs to stay spread out at a microscopic level to get a decent SPF. That is why SPF testing exists. There's actually a study that looked at the SPF from different DIY recipes. The highest estimate they got was SPF 6. Sunscreens also need to be made with proper control so that different batches will consistently get the tested SPF. For a sunscreen, the most important third-party verification, remember, she is into those, that is the SPF. The next most important one is the certification for those manufacturing controls. This has a disclaimer down the bottom, but it's the one used for supplements. You can't just stick this on your website and then sell homemade drugs. It says it is water resistant, but there's no time on it. The ingredient names are not right, and US sunscreens need to have a drug facts label. This is a mess. It is embarrassing that she is recommending this. This is not an informed, evidence-based decision.
Remember, this is not about fear. It is about making informed, evidence-based decisions.
I do not support all women in STEM. I think it's clear Dr. Yvonne Burkart has the right credentials and she's showing a lot of studies, but so much in her video is wrong. And some of this stuff you do need to know the science to spot, but a lot of it is also pretty common sense. If you're in the US, you probably know sunscreens have drug facts labels, and there's that nanoparticle bit where she pretty much debunks herself with the paper she shows. But clearly a lot of people believe her, so when I was watching this, I kept on thinking, why is she doing this and why is it so effective? If you didn't know, Dr. Yvonne Burkart has a $597 Low-tox university course. It teaches pretty much the same kind of stuff.
lower your toxic burden, make safer and smarter choices for yourself and all the people you care about.
I think the core of it is fear is a really powerful emotion. We evolved fear early on as humans, so it is a strong gut kind of feeling. It feels so much more real than critical thinking and scientific logic. Fear can actually stop us from thinking straight. And if you can make a mostly imaginary problem seem way bigger and scarier than it is, people are much more willing to pay for an expensive imaginary solution. And I mean, she might genuinely believe a lot of this stuff. She talks about her low-tox journey. She struggled with infertility, she didn't have a period for 9 months, and then she had a miscarriage. Health problems are scary, the medical system is complicated and confusing. A lot of women's health issues are under-researched. You can spend a whole bunch of time and money just to be told there's no real answers, or even worse, this is all in your head. And it's especially scary in the context of the US healthcare system, where a health problem could bankrupt you. We also hate uncertainty. But human biology is complex. We don't have solid answers for why a lot of health problems happen. And I think this is why it's so effective. The idea that we are actually in control, there are actions that could save us from all of this fear and uncertainty. This is extremely attractive. We want to believe. And the more scared you are, the more you want to watch videos that give you this illusion of control, the more you want to pay $600 for a fake university course. And that is exactly her sales pitch.
This isn't about fear. We are creating a balanced, evidence-based strategy that protects your health long term. It's easy to feel overwhelmed and frustrated, but here is the good news. Remember, this is not about fear. It is about making informed, evidence-based decisions. To go from all the frustration, fear, and overwhelm about ingredients to confident, calm, and empowered, would you take action?
And this fear is magnified when it's mothers worrying about their kids. Again, we can blame evolution. Mothers are the target for her course.
Especially concerning for children, pregnant women. It's hazardous, especially to children and pregnant women, particularly for children and pregnant women. Navigating hormonal issues or raising kids, you need to hear this. I would not spray these around my face or around my child's face. And become the ultimate empowered consumer who is protecting their family from toxins. Click the link below, enroll today.
And you might think that's fine, what's the harm? People can spend their money how they want. Aside from being pretty predatory, there are bigger problems. The more that we hear that individual choices are going to solve our health problems, the less we remember what actually makes a difference. We can't control a lot of things that cause cancer, for example, like genetics and age, but big health improvements do come from societal changes. It would be amazing if we could avoid cancer or infertility just by buying a different toothpaste or switching sunscreen brands, but that is not what the data shows. For example, with cancer, you might have heard that cancer rates are skyrocketing because modern life is so toxic, all the stuff she preaches, but that is not what's going on. Some rates are rising, but that is largely because people aren't dying from other things, and we can also find cancer earlier. But even then, a lot of cancer rates are dropping. For example, this is breast cancer. There's also been massive improvements in cancer treatments. Survival rates for the most common type of childhood leukemia, that went from 10% to over 90%. Testicular cancer also massively increased, and this is because of chemotherapy. My PhD was medicinal chemistry, which is where a lot of these treatments start. But only about 1 out of 10,000 potential molecules actually ends up working in people. So it's not exactly a great, profitable investment. Almost all new medications are discovered through academic research, which is funded by the government through taxes. With miscarriages, one of the big risks is listeria from contaminated food. This is the whole thing about not eating soft cheese. Some foods have more risk, but bacteria do transfer to other foods, so things like safety standards, testing, tracing, and recalls, these are really important, and this is a public health thing. Monitoring can be so good that recalls happen before anyone even gets sick. She also mentions benzene.
Let's not forget about the massive recall of thousands of aerosol products like deodorant, hairspray, and dry shampoo a couple of years ago because of benzene contamination.
Benzene is a common air pollution. There are lots of sources such as petrol, that is metric for gasoline. The amount that you get from these beauty products is way less than you would get from just breathing. And in the US where she is, air levels have decreased massively because of regulations on petrol content and pollution. And you might think people who are into wellness and choosing non-toxic products, they would also support these bigger changes, except a lot of them don't because of this sort of conspiracy mindset. The idea that all our products are toxic, but public health organizations aren't doing anything about it.
But yet somehow this ingredient is still included in countless mainstream products, including sunscreens, which are marketed for daily use.
This makes people forget all the important things these organizations are doing in the background that we take for granted. And in a democracy, they need public support. Again, for a lot of these clean, non-toxic businesses, it's fantastic if you don't trust the FDA or the EPA, because that means you'll buy their alternative products, their fake university courses, or you might just donate to them. For example, the EWG, they've pushed this idea that the FDA can't be trusted for literally decades. So when they posted about the FDA being defunded and how this was bad, their own audience was really confused. If the FDA is as useless as you've been saying, why not just save the money and get rid of them? And this, obviously, is not going to make us healthier. The reason these regulations are in place are to protect us, and they are constantly improving, but in well-regulated markets like the US, they work pretty well. For now. In general, we want more funding of these bodies to enforce regulations and improve them, not less funding. And this is ultimately where this kind of anti-science messaging ends up. I'm sure a lot of these people who are into clean and non-toxic, they genuinely want to have safer products and protect their health. But spreading incorrect information means you are sabotaging yourself and everyone else. You are sabotaging effective collective actions that we can't replace with individual actions like buying a different sunscreen or eating ridiculous amounts of tomato paste and kale. To learn more about regulations keeping products safe, check out Mo's video and follow him here and on Instagram. Half the time when you ask me to make a video, I ask Mo to make a video. A lot of you were worried about me poisoning myself with receipts. He's done a few videos on those. I also have a playlist on more beauty myths.
Get the chemicals out.
Propellant.
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 Propellant.